Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Orange Team Podcast. Today, we look back on the different creative works we have made and what future projects we hope to accomplish. We also discuss an apparent generational shift in tech literacy as technology takes more and more control away from us. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Orange Team Podcast. I'm Mitch, he's Layton, and we're going to have some fun today talking about some odds and ends. Layton, how are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking. And it is great to be back recording, and I'm excited for some of the stuff we've got lined up to talk about today. And yeah, it's just a good day.
I think I've seen a few of the topics you put into the document. I know I'm really curious about the first one. So I guess before we get into it, let's talk a little bit just about like what you've been enjoying, what you've been doing, what's been on your docket lately.
Well, recently I have decided to pick up a new game that some people may have heard of. It's a lot of people have heard it because of a specific YouTuber named Video Game Donkey and his new company Bigmode. I picked up the game Animal Well. As someone who's an enjoyer of platformers and Metroidvanias, it has been a delight to play this game and to experience it. Tried to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, and it's been really exciting to find a game that rejuvenates that sense of exploration and trying new things. I don't know. It doesn't do a lot of hand holding. It just kind of gives you a world and says, figure it out. And I'm a big fan of those games where it's a lot of puzzles, a lot of platforming, a lot of environmental cues, sound cues. It's just a very well-designed game. Obviously, Donkey didn't make the game. I need to go look up the guy who made the game because I need to make sure he gets credit because he is...
I've got the Wikipedia for it
good.
right now. It's Billy Basso.
Yes, Billy Basso.
And it says that he made the engine himself.
Yes, he made the engine himself. He designed all the music himself, did all the sound effects, obviously the level design. Yeah, everything from scratch. It took him 7 years to make this game. It is a labor of love, and it is absolutely worth every penny. I mean, it can tell every minute detail of that game is just phenomenal. The sound design, it's a pixel art great game, but the graphics are still absolutely phenomenal because of the lighting effects. It has just this dynamic lighting, even though it's pixel art. Like, it's just as things move, you can make shadows, and it's really hard to explain. But I highly recommend it, not just because I'm a fan of Donkey, but because it legitimately is a good game if you enjoy those style of games.
Yeah, totally. No, like the PC version has a 91 on Metacritic. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
It's 10 out of 10 from Destructoid, 9 out of 10 from IGN, 90 out of 100 from PC Gamer. Like, this is not your average indie game. Like, it seems like Donkey found something.
Yeah, I think he's a pretty good... I mean, as much as he's a comedian and a jokester, I think he does genuinely have a good eye for what makes a game fun. And he obviously had a lot of people submitting games to Bigmode, and he had to probably go through a lot of them. Maybe he didn't go with all of them personally, but he had a team of people. And obviously this one rose to the top. I don't know if he had any input at all in some of the final touches of the game or if he was purely just a publisher, but I'm glad that he picked it up and that he was able to give it the spotlight it deserved because it's definitely a game that I don't know. I think people would have been interested in it, but I think because Donkey promoted it, it's definitely sold better. And I'm glad of that because it's definitely a game that, for someone to put that much time into it, I'm glad that they're getting a return.
Yeah, no, that's... like, just because publishers actually have more influence and more say in the end product than you might think, up to and including, I know in the old days, it might be, it wouldn't be unheard of for a publisher to say, hey, I want to see an underwater level or something. And it's like, well, we weren't planning an underwater level. Like, well, go find one. Go figure out a place and put one in, like they can actually have a fairly outsized impact on the end product. So who's to say, maybe Animal Well is through and through just Billy's vision. Maybe Donkey and his team came in and said, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? That'd be really interesting to know. That might be a good topic just for the future, is how do publishers nowadays and maybe publishers in the past impact the games they touch?
Yeah, I'd be very interested to know more about that. There's some obvious examples of where publishers have definitely had influence on game development, especially in like the bigger AAA games. But there's probably some other instances where maybe we were less aware of a publisher getting involved. So it might be worth doing some research and learning more. I'd be very curious to know. I know publishers in
Yeah.
most cases are not the most popular people or groups or companies in the gaming world, especially some of the big ones like EA and Ubisoft. But they're not all bad. Obviously, some of them do really well, and we're very happy about that. So, but yeah.
And it's important to remember that for lots of indie game devs, they're technically their own publisher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the publishing as a field is largely about getting a product in the hands of consumers. The developer makes the product, the publisher publishes the product and makes sure that the marketing copy is up to snuff and puts together the trailer and reaches out to interface with gaming publications and websites and different places to give them review copies or to whatever it takes to get some more eyes on the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's a lot more work than people realize. That people think that making the game is definitely the hardest part, in my opinion, hands down. But definitely getting it in front of people, aware of it, interested in it, getting it to how you distribute it. I mean, obviously, distribution is somewhat easier now because of Steam and other digital distribution platforms. But just because you have a game on that platform doesn't mean it'll do well. Getting people to notice it and review it and be interested in it, and maybe you have to give early access to reviewers, to streamers, to maybe I know like for as someone who follows Nintendo, they have their indie world directs that they do now, which are really cool. They spotlight indie games, but I don't know the process that it takes to get in front of Nintendo and to be like, hey, can you spotlight our indie game? Because I'm sure that makes a huge difference in whether or not the game does well. So, but that's what a publisher can do. Donkey was actually in one of those Nintendo indie directs because he must have contacts or just know people, or I don't know how you do it. So it's a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Was he promoting Animal Well?
Yes. Yeah, he was promoting Animal Well. Definitely, you should look it up. It's pretty funny. It's very Donkey. It's so weird to see Donkey being Donkey in an official Nintendo broadcast.
Yeah. Well, he can only be so Donkey. Like, you probably had to rein in a bit of Donkey. You know what I mean?
I think he did rein it in a bit, but it was definitely like
85% Donkey.
But most of it's just him and I believe Billy sitting next to a pond somewhere just talking about the game while like hopping on rocks and doing shenanigans. Like it could have been more Donkey, but it definitely was a very different kind of presentation compared to the rest of the showcase. So, but
that does sound pretty Donkey.
But that's how you get people's attention. You got to sometimes do things a little different. So, but yeah, great
That's
game.
Awesome.
Highly recommend. So, so enough of me. How about you? What have you been enjoying lately?
Oh boy. Well, I've been playing a lot of Age of Empires 2 again with a specific cadre of people. I'm interested in hosting an Age of Empires tournament for reasons. And so after I told people that, they started practicing. And I've been pulled into some of those practice nights where it's like, okay, we're going to do, 2v1, or we're going to put some computers on the hardest difficulty and put all of us against them. And it's just been fun playing Age of Empires again, which is a classic in and of itself. But I haven't played many strategy games recently. Like, it's been a long time since I put serious hours into a strategy game. I've been so deep in shooters and, Overwatch or whatever the flavor of the month team-based, game is. So to be back in a kind of a strategy game mode has been really refreshing. It's like a different part of your brain. It's like digital chess, like a really expansive chess almost to a degree. And it's, for those who don't play real time strategy games, that's a chess might be a good lightweight analogy, a good pocket analogy to hold on to. But that's been fun to reconnect with that circle of friends in that way. And besides that, I've been kind of setting myself up for, all this talk about publishing and production. Like, I've been setting myself up for more production on the different projects, games that I want to make. And one of the aspects of game development, as you touched on, is music. You mentioned that Billy made all the music for Animal Well. So far, of the few tracks that are in Apex Hunters, I've made both of them. But I'd never really had any equipment to continue producing music. It was always kind of a haphazard, just at best, the way I went about like music production. So I said, you know what? No, I'm done doing it this way. And I ordered a MIDI controller, and I ordered a USB to XLR interface, and I ordered a set of Audio Technica like studio headphones, and they all just showed up yesterday. So I was messing around with them this afternoon, and I think there's a lot of potential. It's not like high end equipment. It's not the best of the best, but it's enough to get started. And that's kind of the name of the game, right? Get enough to do what you need to do, whatever those tools are, whatever that equipment is, whatever that graphics card is. Having enough to be able to execute on what needs to be done is the name of the game. And so now I'm all set up on the audio production side, which is awesome.
That's pretty awesome. I'm not an audio engineer, but I recognize a few of those things. And as you were saying that, I was like, that's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited for you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Like when we got started with the podcast, like I got a new Yeti mic, and I've got the mic stand and the pop filter and everything. And so that corner of my office looks like a recording studio a little bit, and that's really exciting to me. Um, I'm looking forward to just messing around, and I've been watching YouTube videos on music theory and like intro to Fruity Loops, which is technically called FL Studio now, and how to make your chords sound even more poppy, and all that sort of nonsense, and just slowly trying to filter through it all and get used to thinking musically again. So it'll be a process, but maybe I'll do a new mix of the Orange Team podcast theme at some point in the future. That might be fun.
I don't know if we mentioned that if the theme that we have for the Orange Team podcast was made by you.
We might have. You know what's funny? Now that you mention it, I was going to say I think we did, but the more I think about it, I think it was one of those first few episodes that we never released.
Yeah. Well.
So yes, the Orange Team podcast song that you hear at the beginning and the end is one of my songs called The Doozy, which was so named because I was working on it, and at one point I was showing my wife and my son one of the instruments. I was like, oh, hey, here's what I'm going to do with this instrument. And my son just smiled and went, that one's a doozy, Dad. And I said, okay, the song is called The Doozy. And I ended up signing a deal so that, because I had made the song on my own and it was just kind of floating around. But when I joined the indie game studio Lone Pine Games and we were working on New City, I signed a little, basically a licensing deal with them to use The Doozy in New City as one of the songs. And then I ended up going on to produce a couple more tracks for New City's soundtrack. And I had to do the licensing deal strictly for this kind of a publishing matter, right? Because I didn't want to sign away my intellectual property. I didn't want them to end up owning this song that was so important to me. Like, my son had named it. It was it's associated with a very particular time and place in my life that I really don't want to lose track of. And so I just wrote up this quick little contract to say, hey, I retain all rights, all rights, privileges, etc. It's just for the purpose of New City. You guys get a in perpetuity license to distribute this and play it with the game or whatnot. Anyway, even though I was on the dev team, which is kind of weird being on the dev team and then writing up a contract for yourself as an external entity.
Yeah, it's not commonly done, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but usually, like a lot of companies, that's their whole shtick is that once you work for them, everything you create while working for them is theirs. And it's kind of a little. I'm glad that you were able to do that. That you were working with a company that did give you that. They were willing to work with you on that and not just say no.
Yeah.
It has to be ours. Now, is it in the game or it's just for the trailer? Just for that trailer you made?
No, it's in the game.
It's actually in the game.
It's one of the tracks that will shuffle through. Yeah.
Okay. I should know that, but I didn't. So
all of our trailer tracks actually show up in the game. I want to say three tracks for sure for the main game, and then I did a track for the mod pack, like the official. So at one point we were building out the modding functionality, and so we built like an official first party mod that turned it into like a vaporwave game aesthetically. And so we did new music tracks that were kind of inspired by that kind of synth future vibe, and I did a track for that one too. So that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the process of learning how to make music, and especially trying to emulate that old school 90s SimCity aesthetic. The doozy, like I said, I didn't make it for New City at first, so it may or may not match. I feel like the mood matches at least. But the next song I made, or not the next one, but the next big one, kind of has a jazzy swing vibe that I'm very, very proud of. And that one's called Tourist Trap. And all of these songs are actually available up on our SoundCloud. Or I say ours. I haven't worked for Lone Pine Games for a long time now. But if you go search for New City or Lone Pine Games on SoundCloud, you'd find all of these songs and more. The other songs made by Lone Pine himself.
That's awesome. I've gone and actually listened to some of those songs over, especially the Tourist Trap. That one. I mean, I love both, but I remember when I first heard the Tourist Trap, it was just stuck rent free in my head for a while.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, no, I think you do have a knack for video game music, and I think you have a knack just for music in general. But I do think that because of your background, that you just have a natural talent for what sounds good for a video game, especially, and maybe it's also just for that style of game that you enjoy too, because even for Apex Hunters, the vibe really fits with that game and the style and what the atmosphere of that game. The doozy, and even though the doozy wasn't made for New Cities, it fit very well, and same with the Tourist Trap. So it's really good stuff. I envy that. I've wanted to figure out how to make music, but it's not that I couldn't. I know that if I just took the time and really focused, I could probably do it, but I've also realized that it's just my mind always wanders to other things. So I think that it's not a matter of I couldn't, it's just that I enjoy other things more.
Yeah.
But I've always wanted to have that ability to be like, I'm going to make a soundtrack for a video I'm going to make. Where I think in reality, I'll probably just contract it out to you.
I will be standing by because I would really love to do music for like some sort of short form film or something, like, a little YouTube short. Not a YouTube short, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
like a short little video.
Isn't that weird that we have to clarify that now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Darn YouTube.
That's something I wanted to actually ask you about on this particular episode.
Mm-hmm.
Because making music again's got me in kind of like a content creation mode, working on the games again, blah, blah, blah. And I know that you have always enjoyed more video production. And, there's YouTubers that you really look up to in the same way that I look up to certain developers. And let's put ourselves in that space, right? Let's entertain the idea a little bit. What would you do if you were given a blank check in terms of time and money, and it's just like, hey, Leighton, go make a video? Like, what would you end up making? And when I say a blank check, we don't have to play the whole, okay, well, then I have an unlimited effects budget. I think the magic of YouTube, and I think you'll agree, is the restrictions. That you make something more beautiful and raw and real as a result of the restrictions of like, okay, well, we can't just go contract out a VFX studio and do this big gnarly thing. Well, like, what kind of videos would you make? Like, what kind of an impact would you want to leave on the YouTube landscape?
That's a really interesting question. And it's something I have pondered on a lot, and it kind of changes all the time. For the longest time, I just looked up to certain YouTubers who made really funny, shorts and skits, whether it be video game related or just something completely different. I wanted to make videos like Corridor and Freddie W for a long time. And then I wanted to make more videos kind of like Joel Haver, which are a little bit more, which I mean, I could. I just have to, I think the hardest part for me is just I'd have to actually practice my improv and practice script writing. But I think the video style I've wanted to do for the longest time is something with a very deep emotional impact. And I've struggled a lot about what that is because I think it has to come from something very personal. And I have a specific idea in mind that I've been kind of holding on to, and I'm not 100% sure how much I want to talk about it, but I will say that it is very much tied to something that I heard in a teaching recently. But it's kind of, I can give you the name of it. It's called Remain.
And we can talk after the Remain. Okay.
And so it's a project I've been thinking about, and it's got a more metaphorical meaning, but the idea is it would be kind of set in a somewhat post-apocalyptic setting, and it'd be about people having to make the choice whether to leave the comfort of where they're at or to remain where they're at. Yeah. And and I thought of this. This is before. I know this sounds a little bit like Fallout in the vaults, but it's actually the idea came from something else, and it was very much before the show came out. But it is funny that Fallout show came out in relation to that.
That does happen. First off, I just wanted to say, we can talk about this after the podcast too, if you want to kind of hold on to it and just let the idea. And we don't even have to talk about it if you really want to let that idea germinate. I did want to say though that culturally, I've noticed odd trends. Like, you remember when zombies were the thing? And when I say the thing, I mean there was a movie and a game and books and everything coming out every single month, just about in the mid 2000s there. We can go all the way back to that Dawn of the Dead remake in like the early 2000s. We could cover Shaun of the Dead in 2004. That's kind of the more comedy side. We can go all the way up to Left 4 Dead in 2007.
The Walking Dead? Isn't it Walking Dead?
The Walking Dead began in late 2000. I think it was 2009, wasn't it?
I don't remember. It's been a while.
AMC's The Walking Dead.
Isn't there still like some form of spin-off still going for
2010. That? Yeah, the story continues.
I mean, the show is The Walking Dead at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, the reason the show began in 2010 is because the comics began in the mid 2000s, I believe, 2003. So there was just this era where zombies were the thing. We're entering an era where like the post-apocalypse is the thing. We kind of had a little bit of a resurgence of Mad Max a few years back. So kind of the Desert Wasteland, Fury Road.
We got the new movie
came out. The new movie just came out. We've got Fallout. We've got. There's been lots of movies and games. Like, I would say The Walking Dead served dual purpose because it was part of the zombie zeitgeist, and now it's part of the post-apocalyptic zeitgeist. And things are very kind of brutal and. Well, life goes on after the end of the world, but what does it look like and at what cost, is kind of the questions of things. So your idea, I'm not saying it's reductive or derivative. I'm saying, it makes sense that it's a part of the zeitgeist of, what are we doing after the end of the world? And, and not not what might be defined as the true end of the world, but it's like the end of the world you knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's important to keep in mind for lots of post-apocalyptic fiction, is they do represent the end of a known world, not necessarily the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because as The Walking Dead shows, as Fallout shows, life goes on, and it's just like, okay, well, what does life look like now? We deal with giant mutant salamanders that try to eat us. Waters irradiated, and so you can't just go drinking from any stream or river or pond. Um, in The Walking Dead, just because somebody died doesn't mean they're dead, and they're still going to try to kill you. So you've got to remove the head or destroy the brain, as it were. But yeah, I like the fact that you have an answer though. Like more than anything else, I knew you would have one, and you did. And I know I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Please make it, and I will help you in any way that I can. Um, I think you mentioned Freddie W. You mentioned Corridor Digital. You mentioned oh, who else did you mention?
Joel Haver.
Oh, Joel Haver. So there's a lot wrapped up in that, because obviously we know Freddie and Corridor love comedy. They also love to be faux serious, where it's like played straight but way over the top, like cool, super cool tactical reloads or whatever, or Nerf John Wick or whatever. Um, but you mentioned that your idea would be serious, and I know that Freddy, and I know that Corridor, and I know that lots of other short form YouTube videos do serious too, and we need all of that, just as a generation. We need to laugh, we need to cry, we need to be um, given something worth thinking about and something worth really dwelling on. And that's the problem with a lot of post-apocalyptic media, and especially in this wave that we're in, is the answers to the questions that post-apocalyptic media, like the questions they pose and the answers they propose, are frequently very dark and like nihilistic and
Hopeless.
fatalist, hopeless. And I don't know about you, but I've had a hard time plugging into some of this stuff, because it's like, that's not me. Like I can't find I can't find purchase. If you imagine like popular media right now as like a boulder that you're climbing, it's like I can't find a handhold on it to grab hold of and to climb up and think about. And it's like, that's, it's part of my drive, where I'm like, I gotta make games, I gotta make music, and part of my drive to you, like, you gotta make videos, you've got to do this. It's like, I know your voice artistically. I know, I trust the things you would choose to focus on, and the narratives and the themes you would choose to express, and the colors you would choose to paint the canvas with. And I'm like, dude, the world needs that. And I think, this encouragement goes out really to anyone listening. And we've said it before. It's like this: the audience may get huge, but in my mind, we're making the podcast for like a half dozen very specific people. And of those half dozen very specific people, I'm like, every single one of you has a story that needs to be told. And that's kind of what I want to do, is figure out how to tell my own stories and figure out the process well enough that I can help others tell theirs, whether that is fiction, written fiction, whether that is video, whether that is music, whether that is games, whatever it might be. The time has come. And like, look at Rooster Teeth closing, right? They even admit in like all of their closing videos and stuff, they're like, hey, Rooster Teeth's closing, but now is your chance to step up and fill this void that we're leaving. And that just gets me thinking, like, makes me just want to go grab a game engine and just do a machinima, right? Like, I don't even know what it would be yet, but I know that, you've probably got some ideas. I got some ideas. I'm like, there's no reason we couldn't start that on Monday. You know what I mean? But, yeah. And what are your thoughts?
No, I think you make a lot of good points, and it's a message we've been pushing, and it's not, I don't, maybe pushing is the wrong word, but it's a message we've been, the theme that's been throughout our podcast, and I think it comes up, I swear, almost every podcast, and this isn't a bad thing, but that whole go and make something, go do it, go make something, and it's something that we see in other creators too that have shared that message to us, and I feel like for me, I share it almost as like I'm expecting that reverb to hit me back because I need to tell myself that message. I need to continually remind myself that same thing. Even though I'm encouraging everyone else to do it, I have to make sure that I'm the one that's also following through. And, there's always a time and a place. Like, you got to go make something. And sometimes making something doesn't mean like jumping headfirst into the whole thing. Sometimes it's simply taking time out of your day to just write down your thoughts and build notes and just slowly chip away until you've made that thing. It doesn't have to all be all in one go. Now, if you're in that place in life where it's like, you just kind of have that feeling like, I've got this opportunity, I need to take advantage of it, then maybe you are in a position where you just need to jump headfirst in because you've got, maybe less responsibilities and more free time and more money or just more something. I know for myself, I have a lot of responsibility. I have 3 kids and a wife and a mortgage and, and a company. But overall, I still want to be creative. And I'm trying to, that's part of the reason I even started the business I have, is I wanted to be able to still support myself, but also selfishly build all the tools necessary to do the things I want to do on the side. So get the software, get the computer, get the cameras, get the audio equipment, get all the stuff to do the kind of video I want to do. And I'm trying to come up with ideas. So that idea that I mentioned is something that might be my next one, or it might be, 5 down the road. I might want to do a few videos in between now and then to kind of help get ready for it, because I do have kind of big aspirations for that idea. I don't expect it to be like a movie. I have this vision of it being a short film, but it has a very specific vibe and message, and I really want to kind of think through it very carefully and methodically. And one of the key things that I've noticed, and I watch a lot of videos kind of breaking down movies and shows and the cinematography. One of the things they were breaking down about Spielberg, Spielberg is actually George Lucas, but Spielberg as well. But George Lucas is that there's a video about how if you remove the dialogue from Star Wars, does it still convey the message of the story? And they even went a step further. It's like, if you just put like a Japanese dub over it and made it black and white, do you still understand the film? And it's actually amazing how much of that film is show, don't tell. Even though George Lucas, notoriously bad script writer when it comes to dialogue, but he does have a really good taste for music and vision. Like, the music tells the story almost more than the dialogue. And then the way that he sets up the scenes and the visual storytelling is so powerful. And so that's something I'm thinking about a lot, is the show, don't tell kind of aspect. And that's what I want to try and absorb as much of that as I can to the next video project I do. Is I want to be like, okay, this video is going to be, I've got to think about what camera angles I want, what shots I want. I'm going to build maybe even some rudimentary storyboards. Like, this is going to be like, and this isn't like because I want to make it big on YouTube. This is purely for me because it's a project that I'm very passionate about and I think will be really fun and push me as a creator.
Right.
But that one's like, that's like the goal video. You know what I mean? Like, there's always that carrot. I do have other script ideas too, like some a little bit more comedy in nature. One I actually did a while back, and it wasn't even for YouTube. I think it's private. I don't think it's public, but it was a video I made for my wife for Valentine's Day, and I messed around with some special effects, putting shoulder angel, shoulder devil on my shoulder. So I was playing around because Corridor did a video. This is, I remember 2 years ago, when Adobe After Effects was coming out with this roto tool that was like, I don't want to call it AI driven because they weren't using AI as a buzzword back then, but it was very machine learning. It could basically assess a scene and like rotoscope people out. And I wanted to use that tool. So I was like, that'd be a fun project to do for her. So I basically filmed myself. I didn't have any costumes. I just had a white shirt and a red shirt. And I found a blank wall, and I recorded myself in front of it. And it's a lot harder than you think, trying to record yourself and be talking to nobody and trying to make sure you're facing the right way and do all the right motions, but also not moving too much because you got to, stay in frame, and you got to do rotoscoping, which the more movement you do, the harder it is. But eventually, after 2 weeks of just flat out hard work, and thankfully this was like during I don't want to say it was the height of the pandemic, but it was during that time where I was a lot more free time. So I was able to just dig right into it. So 2 weeks straight, I was basically just grinding on this. I was maxing out my computer. I could do no more than an 8-second shot of rotoing on my computer before it ran out of RAM. And I had
That's awesome.
it wasn't a lot, but it was 32 gigs of RAM on my laptop, which I thought was a lot at the time. Apparently not. So I had to do 8-second shots, then render it out.
4K or 1080p?
It was a 4K video, but I did 4K so that I would have a cleaner edge. But I think I rendered it out at 1080 because the shoulder angels are only going to be like tiny little things. So I didn't need to be super high res, but I wanted to have a good roto.
Right.
So I used high res video, but I rendered out lower. But still, basically, and it was in beta at the time. So I think it had major memory leaks or something, because basically it would fill up the RAM. And then if you went to run another one, it wouldn't delete the stuff that was in RAM. So the only way to do it was to render the thing out and then completely kill the program and then reboot it and start again on the next shot. But it had to be at least 8 seconds or less, or I basically shut my computer down. So I figured out how to make it all work, splice things together. And then I did motion tracking on my shoulder. I made sure to wear a shirt that had patterns on it that I could easily track, so that my shoulder angels stayed on the shoulder correctly. And yeah, it was just all shot on an iPhone, all shot, using the built-in mic, and it wasn't fancy, but it was a fun project. And I've thought about that for a long time. I was like, that'd be a fun little show or skit to do, where just basically different scenarios where the shoulder angel and devil show up and like what they would actually say to me in those situations.
Yeah. That's cool though. Like I'm happy you took the time to, because making stuff like that for family is so cool. It's a great way to put your skills to work and your interests and passions, and like make something unique and special, like just for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I know you've done similar things too with certain music video type things you've done. I think those are pretty cool.
I've done, like that's, yeah. I've done like mixtapes, like for specific events, like, our anniversary or my wife's birthday or whatnot. For my dad, I can't remember if it was his birthday or Father's Day. But one year I made him a level in Half-Life 2 that you played through, and it was like a series of rooms connected by teleporters. But when you beat it, you would teleport up above it and look down on it, and it said Happy Father's Day.
That's awesome.
So it was like you were running through the letters the whole time. And then I made my wife a little game. I think it was originally for Christmas. And it was like a procedurally generated text-based adventure where you're going through this mansion that's procedurally generated, and there's a monster. And you're trying to avoid the monster and find all these, I think, gifts. But when you find them all, it like puts together a message that says, Merry Christmas, Michelle, or whatever. So that was, yeah, it's fun to do, right? Because then you're doing something you really like doing, and you're like, oh, and this is for them. I don't know.
Yeah, it's fun when, I think that's the thing we think about is sometimes as creators, and maybe it's somewhat fed to us because of the expectation and what we consume, but we kind of have this expectation, and maybe I'll speak to myself, is that it needs to be seen by a lot of people. And I know I've fallen into that trap even with this podcast, where I was like, oh man, we need, we want to get loads and loads of people to watch it, and it's like, no, sometimes it is more fun when it's just made for specific people, and in that reward when you get to talk to those people or show it to those people, it's really good, especially when you can surprise them. The video I made for my wife, she had no idea. And actually, weirdly enough, it was a video I made because we'd had a little bit of an argument, and she's going to be listening to this podcast, so she'll laugh at this, and she knows this. But we were in a little bit of a fight because I was so trying to figure stuff out in life and it was busy, and I just was kind of a little bit annoyed by Valentine's Day coming up. It kind of snuck up on me, and I was just like, oh man, we got to plan something. And she was upset that I wasn't really putting a lot of time and effort to it, because I was like, I was like, don't you care about this? And like, I do care, but also we only have so much money and I can't do a bunch. So I was like, what can I make that's not going to cost me a ton of money, but also special and unique? And then that came to me, and I was like, I'm going to make this video. So I wrote the script all in one take. I don't even think I edited it at all. I just wrote it stream of consciousness and just like, yep, that's good enough. And did all the recordings, made sure I waited for her to be gone certain days so there's no one home, and then edit it in secret. And then for my dad, I did another surprise one because he had his 60th birthday, but I wasn't going to be able to be there because I'd already made plans to be somewhere else, because he had previously said that, he was not going to do anything for his birthday. So I was somewhere else. And since I knew that was going to be happening, I was like, well, I still want to do something special because he's turning 60 and I'm sad I can't be there, because normally for a 60th birthday, it would be a very special thing to have a bunch of people come and stuff. But it was just, there was going to be no one else there. So I contacted basically everybody that I knew that knew my dad. So this is like people and friends and family. So everyone in his life group, everyone he was friends with that I knew that I was able to get a hold of. I used my mom to kind of connect to some of those people. And then a lot of his friends and family from Australia, I was able to contact them, and they all sent me videos. Every single one of them sent me a personalized video for saying, and I sent them a doc saying, please put it in this format, in this aspect ratio, and yada, yada. And they gave them a drive, and they dropped it all in there. And I got all these videos. The video ended up being like 20-something minutes long. And yeah, it was really amazing getting to see all that. And then I put together like a slideshow at the end of all these photos. I went through all the old photo albums and found specific photos of us as a family and of him when he was really young. So I got photos from like before I was born, before I even met my mom, like as a kid, and doing crazy stuff because he traveled a lot. So him, basically on farms and traveling across the U.S., traveling across Australia, and I put it all together with music and stuff. And then I had my video where because I was somewhere out in the mountains. And it was pretty fun. And so I sent that to him, and he's watched it many, many times since then. He said it was one of the most special things he's ever received. So that made me feel really, really good.
That's awesome.
Anyway, it's fun when I think you and I are we've done like mine's videos, yours is games. It's actually really fun to hear your stories, because I was like, I didn't know you did some of that stuff. That's pretty cool that you made like literal games for your dad, and for actually it's ironic that we both did it for our spouse and for our dads.
Yeah, isn't that something? Because like, I don't know, my mom doesn't game much, so that it'd be kind of, she'd just be like, oh, that's nice,
Well, she'd probably appreciate it, but it's definitely not the same level your dad would.
Exactly, because he and I would play Half-Life together. We played Counter-Strike together. That all started with him. So every wasted hour, we can walk it all the way back.
It's not wasted if it's a good memory.
No, it's not. It's not wasted if it's a good memory. And did I ever tell you that I actually won a Counter-Strike tournament, like with a cash prize?
You might have, but you should definitely share the story.
I was just going to say, it's not wasted time if you actually get paid for it. Like, at the point that you can put a dollars per hour amount on your Counter-Strike time, right? Like, it's like, okay. But the story goes that I was playing in a for fun league where everybody signs up and gets drafted onto it. It's simulated like an actual league. So everyone signs up and goes through a draft process. And then there are people acting as general managers of franchises. And within a franchise, there will be teams for the different skill brackets. And you get drafted to a particular team, and that's your crew. There can be player trades, there can be players cut, there can be free agents that might get signed later on in the season, etc., etc. And then you go through and play your Counter-Strike matches. And it's just a really cool setup, all things considered. But I was playing through the season with my team, and just as a team building exercise, I was like, let's sign ourselves up, or I signed us up, sort of asked forgiveness instead of permission, for playing this extracurricular tournament. That was a separate tournament. I had learned about it from a particular Counter-Strike streamer who was associated with it, and they were like, hey, any team who wants to come try their luck, come sign up. There will be a cash prize. All you have to do is, use this particular software in the run up to the matches, and you'll get a little bit of extra bonus money, and this, that, and the other. So a couple of my team members and I actually did use the software, which meant we got a little bit higher payout than the base. And there were like 6 or 8 teams, maybe, that had signed up for this tournament. And come the day of the tournament, only us and one other team showed up. And of the other team that showed up, they had like 2 ringers. So it wasn't even their group that had signed up for the tournament. And so we're in a Discord call with the admins of the tournament, and they're like, yep, it's just you guys. So we can go right to the grand finals if you want and play it as a best of 5. It's like, all right, let's go. So we ended up playing out. And because my team was actually a team, not playing with ringers, and we had set positions and had strategies we'd practice together and stuff, we ended up winning 3 out of 5. Just boom, 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 done. And yeah, for a while I was like, are we actually going to get paid out? Like, is this real? And then money showed up in my bank account, and I could say for the first time that I had won money playing a game. And that's fun. And that's so, look at that, Dad. I can make 4 cents an hour playing Counter-Strike.
I made it. It's all worth it.
I made it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's super awesome. I mean, and it's a nice, well, I mean, hopefully it's not the last time, but, at least you can say at least once you've
Hopefully
done
not.
it. But,
Yes.
at the same time, I mean, obviously inspired your career path too. So I would say that you've technically made a lot more money if you don't include the winnings. I would say that your career path has definitely
That's true.
Got you to where
If I had never played Counter-Strike, or just been that deeply involved in like Half-Life and the modding scene and everything, I would have never really come to the understanding that I had of software development as a career. I just wouldn't have had the tangible manifestation of it.
So this is an interesting, this does feed a little bit into what you said, but I've had this interesting thought recently, and I could be wrong, and I'd be very curious to know what the listeners think, but also what you think specifically about this idea that we grew up in a very specific time and era where video games, like I attribute a lot of my tech knowledge to the fact that I just wanted to play video games and get better graphics and make the games run better. Like, I was determined to make games work. So when I had a PC back in the day, it was whatever the family computer was, and I was just like, I'm going to make this thing work. So I learned so much about computers due to my desire to play video games. Because some people will be like, oh, video games are a waste of time, but obviously not, because a lot of people have made great careers out of it, whether it be in the video game industry or just inspired by it. But I've had this feeling that this new generation that's come up, and this isn't for everybody, this is not a generalization, this is more like a bell curve. There's exceptions on both sides. But I feel like there are a lot more people now that are into video games and use technology, but are way less invested in how things work and figuring out like how things work, because so much of it now is so easy. Whereas back when we were growing up, it was like you really had to dig into like understanding the hardware and understanding the base level software, and it pushed us to kind of troubleshoot. Whereas I've seen a lot of people now where I'm like, young people I'd interact with, and I was so surprised that despite their being so enveloped in technology, they're not necessarily as tech savvy as I would have expected them to be at that age. So I'm curious if you feel like that there's truth in that, or if I'm just absolutely stuck in a bubble and I'm not seeing the whole picture.
No, I think there's absolutely truth in that. And I think it comes down to something I had heard someone say the other day, which is, if I could paraphrase it, we were made for difficulty. Like, life is meant to be hard. And that isn't to say, obviously there are times where like, this is too hard, like this is over the top. But you'll notice the concept of flow, where somebody gets so into a task that it just kind of consumes their 100% of their mental processing power, and they're pushed right to the edge of their limits. Like, the flow state that results from that is when people come to life, when they feel the most satisfied, the most engaged, the most driven to do whatever it is that they're doing. You can't get to that flow state if you're not pushed and tested and challenged. In our era, computers were challenging. It was not something you just like nowadays. Your phone, your iPad has one button, or it has like the home button, the power and wake button, and then volume up and down. And that's it. That's all you get. Like everything has been simplified and streamlined and culled down and shrunk, and everything that it takes to make it so broadly accessible. But in so doing, in removing these barriers to entry, it removed the drive to learn and understand. It's sort of like people get frustrated if they don't, they tap the app and it doesn't come up, then it's like, well, forget it. You can just see it watching somebody interact with like a modern mobile device. The second something doesn't go as expected, obviously they're not going to open Task Manager and maybe try to find the process. Obviously they're not going to maybe get into the terminal and try to, restart explorer.exe. They just kind of give up. And that isn't even their fault. Maybe it's because of the simplification process. They don't have access to these tools and resources. But we live in a world with all the rough edges filed off, at least with regard to tech. And because that's the case, people don't have that drive. They aren't going to learn it or to attempt to understand it beyond what is strictly necessary. And maybe there's a place for that. I've heard it said that technology should just sort of be transparent, like it shows up, does its job, and gets out of the way. But when that's happening in a very practical sense, that only works as long as nothing goes wrong. And the second something goes wrong, it's better to, like, kind of like your car. Like, I'm not a mechanic. And you typically, I sit down, I turn the key, I turn the wheel, I push the pedal, it goes, right? But if something goes wrong, if I actually understood how the car worked, I could pop the hood and I could tell at a glance, okay, is this fatal? Is my car totaled? Or is this just a spark plug? Do I just need to replace that spark plug? And computers can be a little bit of the same way, where it doesn't take a lot of effort and learning for you to be able to say, oh, is my computer hung up and I need to reboot? Or is it just this process that I can, kill Firefox and restart it? So to answer your question, yeah, I feel like it is sort of a cultural thing. People like to say, oh, this generation does this. It's like they're sort of the sum of their inputs. Like, it's not even so much that they collectively decided to be difficult when it came to tech. It's like other people made decisions on their behalf, and now that's just the tech they have access to. I kind of sound like a stereotypical Linux guy, but I love the fact that Linux is hard to some degree. Like that I have so much control and access to the system under the hood. I can break things. Things might be broken that wouldn't be broken on Windows, but it's my computer, and that's today. It's not your phone, it's Apple's. It's not your computer, it's Microsoft's. It's not your gaming console, it's Xbox. It's PlayStation's, Sony's, whatever. There's just been that move towards, you don't own this, you're just borrowing it from us for a while until we decide it's inconvenient. And that's suboptimal. When you don't feel ownership over something, you're not going to feel that drive to understand it or to pour too much of yourself into it because someone might just yank it away.
Yeah, I think when there's a sense of ownership, you grow because you're more tied to it. You feel like you've worked for it, but also there's an innate sense of like, I just see too like this sense of like not caring for things. Like we live in a very disposable society, like the right to repair kind of movement. Like I'm glad that there's people fighting for that because we do have this tech and all these things coming out where it just feels like it's designed to obsolete way faster than it used to, and that's a shame because people don't recycle this stuff. And this, I think the sad thing is, even if it gets sent to a proper recycling place, it's not even guaranteed that it'll get recycled properly. So I think there's an element of trying to make things last that's just not there anymore because we're kind of been I don't know, but that wasn't really the main point too. The main point was just this feeling like there's this, and obviously there's a lot of people still out there that do have a passion to play video games and want to learn how to make games and do get passionate about tech. So I do believe those people are out there. And maybe it's just my circle, but I've just been surprised at how few of those people I'm finding. People that I thought, well, they play lots of video games, they must be more tech savvy. I find out that all they know is how to turn the game on. They know how to download the app. They know how to download it. So they know the interface, but when something goes wrong, they have no idea how to troubleshoot. And I'm just so kind of thankful that I had so many opportunities to troubleshoot growing up with, technology being as, I don't want to say archaic, but it definitely wasn't as refined as it is today. I mean, Windows XP, one of the best operating systems ever, was still kind of rough around the edges in certain ways. Like you still had to know your way around it, how to figure it out, and there was loopholes into certain things. Nowadays, the operating systems barely let you get into the weeds of stuff now. Like everything's kind of...
They do everything they can to make sure you can't. Like I'll have to watch YouTube videos or read guides on like, oh, I need access to this setting. I know exactly where that setting is on Windows 7 or before, but it's just not there. And it's like, oh, well, you have to create a file on your desktop and you have to name it God mode and then append this GUID. And then when you try to open that file, it's going to open a special version of Control Panel with everything. And I'm like, are you insane? Like, give me my computer. Like, I need this setting, and it's not hard.
Yeah. Well, now with Microsoft pushing very hard in AI, and I don't want to speak too much on this because I don't know much. I've just read headlines a little bit, but the Surface computers coming out and how they're very much pushing the Copilot type situation where it just seems like it's becoming more and more where, and I think they have this vision of the future that's just so different than what you and I kind of want. Like, even though there's a little bit, it's Star Trek-y and it's very like, you just speak to your computer and it does things. But I guess for me, right, I do like that sense of still like having the reins a little bit, whereas I feel like everything's being yanked away from me and I just have to accept how it is. And that's not necessarily the case. And I think maybe in a future podcast, that'll be something you can speak a lot more to, is how to regain control of your digital life. And
right,
because I know it's something you're very passionate about and something you've actually not just spoken about, but you actually have executed on. So that might be something. And I've kind of delved a little bit into it by trying to regain some of my digital content, by like with, turning my physical media into digital media that I can stream, and that's stuff that I've purchased and own. But even then, there's like this sense of like all the new video games having DRM and having to be online all the time. That's why they're making all these live service games now, because you can't, they're impossible. And not that I'm promoting piracy, but like they're impossible to pirate. So they're trying to make sure that they can continually have control and earn and sap money off of people. So that's, again, why I'm so glad to see games like, this is kind of circling back a little bit, games like Animal Well, where it's a one-time cost. You get the game, you play the game, you enjoy the game, and that's it.
Exactly.
And I miss those kind of games. I remember when like the iPhone and the early Androids and all that stuff came out, and there were apps, we'd had games on there and it'd be like, oh, it's $2 or it's $5, maybe $10. It was really expensive, but like they were only a few bucks, most of these games. And I remember being like, oh man, I don't want to get that game because it's a couple bucks. I'm like, I wish we could go back to that now. Back when you paid like $2 for a game and it was the whole game. Now everything's free to play. And now you have to do all these microtransactions to get all the content, or they lock things behind a timer. And I've been thinking about it for my kids. I don't let them play on the iPad a lot, but I do want to find educational stuff for them. And everything's just got all these ads and paywalls and stuff in there. I was like, I just want to pay one time, and they have the thing. So
right.
I don't know.
Well, and not only that, but like the idea that I don't have a problem with DLC and microtransactions when they're done right.
Yes. Yes.
Like we've talked about Boomerang Foo. Mm-hmm. And when it's like, hey, you can pay $1 and you get these extra skins. Doesn't affect gameplay. It's just a way to say, hey, I want my avocado to have a pirate hat or whatever, right? That's cool. When it's like, hey, so we're already announcing a DLC mission pack before the game has even released, which will add another 7 missions for the low cost of $9.99, I have to look them in the eye and say, tell me that that could not have been included in the core base game that you're about to sell me. You know, like, why is that DLC you're announcing before the game is released? And that's the problem.
Yep, 100%. And, you know, it's so interesting, too, because, like, a lot of games now are sold digitally. So there's a lot less cost to distribute. Like, and obviously games have gotten more expensive, so I have to, but to make, I mean, but they've also gotten more expensive to buy. But yeah, and that's a whole conversation topic about budgeting in games. I think we've talked about this too, that things ballooning out of control with movies and everything. So yeah, it's crazy, you know, and I'm just glad to see, you know, indie stuff starting to take off. Smaller budget movies, smaller budget games, music, even, like, just all those people. And maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm reaching the age where I'm looking for more of that, you know. Maybe that's,
yeah.
I don't know. I probably just need to get out more.
Yeah, you know, we do a lot of talking about tech and gaming on our Tech and Gaming podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe we should honestly, unironically, have an episode that we record outside, like maybe over a Discord call over the phone or something. That would be really interesting for a novelty episode.
Well, I feel like I want to do that. I'm going to do it on my, I don't have any grass at my house, but I my parents do, and I'll just go sit in their grass. That way I'm touching grass while we're recording.
Perfect. I love it.
That we should definitely just do an outdoor one, and any ambient nature noises you get, that's what you get. It'll be the ambient nature podcast. So,
beautiful. I love it.
Underneath the orange sky.
Anything we need to mute, we can mute.
Yeah, sure.
Any copyrighted songs that fly by.
Yeah. Any neighbors? No. So, well, I think that wraps things up for now. This has been fun. I really enjoyed the subjects and the topics we talk about, and yeah.
As season 2 goes on, it's getting closer and closer to the sorts of conversations that we had before the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but that's sort of by design on my part, and that's why I've kind of pushed, like, we have the topics, we have things, but it's like, let's just see where the conversation develops. And like the last 2 podcasts we've done, I'm like, this just sounds like exactly like the phone call we would have been having otherwise. And so I'm enjoying it. I think you're enjoying it.
I am enjoying it.
But the question is our audience enjoying it? So please let us know. If you like this format and this style of conversation, leave a like, leave a comment, give us a subscribe, all those fun things. If you're on Apple Music or Spotify, please feel free to leave a review. It doesn't have to be a 5-star review, but if it's not, please let us know what we could do better. And we look forward to earning your listen and earning your time again next week with another episode of the Orange Team Podcast. Until then, I'm Mitch. He's Leighton. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.